Well, I'm sure you've noticed that in any given year, your students come to your classrooms with a variety of reading skills. Some are reading off the charts, and some are struggling, and probably most of them hover somewhere in the middle, and you need to move them along and help them to become better. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do to boost your students' reading aptitude. And I'm going to focus on one area. Thanks for joining me again today. My name is Avia Kelly, and this is my YouTube channel, Literacy in Elementary Schools, Improving How Students Read, Write, and Communicate. So what's that one way that I was talking about? Well, your vocabulary instruction. I know some of you are thinking, well, I already do tons of vocabulary work. Well, we can do better, and we can be more efficient at how we do it as well. I was just reading a study that talked about how in the upper elementary grades, they did at least 12 words a day. Now you have to be very focused and intentional if you're going to do that many words. And I might not recommend that many for the younger grades. But the idea is if you can expose your students to words that they will encounter in their text, that you will use in your classroom discussions, that they will get an opportunity to write about, and that when you introduce those words, you associate those words with words they already know, then you increase the likelihood of your students being able to retain those words, relate them to something else, and even use them in their own speaking. So that's one way we can increase our students' reading aptitude, because that frees up the mental space that they would take, or the time they would take, to decode and try to think about an unfamiliar word, and they can just read for comprehension and understanding. Now, I know this sounds really easy and like a fairy tale, but another study I read talked about the discrepancy between students from a high socioeconomic status and a low socioeconomic status. And sometimes there were as many as 400 or more word deficits between the high and the low income families. Now, we don't get to choose what families or students come from, rightfully so. But what we can do is sharpen the saw for all of our students, help them to have access to text. And one way we do this is through vocabulary instruction. Now, when you do vocabulary instruction, find different ways to do it. Have word activities, word games, have ways that students do closed reading exercises, have ways that students write about what they're learning and use those words. Let them talk to their partners or somebody in the class about what they're learning. Have them do multiple activities that cement the meaning of those words, not just reading in the dictionary and somehow they're going to remember those words. Nah, that's probably the least effective. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a colleague earlier, and one of the things he spoke about was when we put up posters of words that students are learning in our classroom, we might not want to do an alphabetical listing of words. Students don't encounter words in the real world alphabetically. And the same way in our classrooms, we can do them by whatever, by subject, we can do them by word types or different ways, but don't just do them alphabetically because they don't encounter words like that. So to wrap up, couple things you want to remember when you're doing vocabulary instruction to help boost your students' reading aptitude. One, you want to make sure that the words are taught in relation to words they know. Two, you want to have frequent opportunities to revisit those words and to use those words. Three, you don't want to focus on dictionary definitions or alphabetic listings of words in your classroom. And I could go on, but the key is once your students have that vocabulary knowledge and that is real and authentic, then it frees up the mental space that they use up when they're reading to figure out what a word means or how to say a word, and they can focus on understanding text. We could do tons of videos on just vocabulary, but what you're doing with your vocabulary is good, and we can make it more focused and more intense and flood our classroom with vocabulary, but in meaningful ways so that our students can be better readers. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.